Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on understanding the trends and disruptions of cloud security during this COVID-19 era. So let us begin the session. Welcome everybody to the webinar on understanding the trends and disruptions of cloud security. And during this COVID-19 pandemic, we clearly know that it has been dramatically, attached the way we live and work. The sudden shift towards the remote working because of the worldwide lockdowns has actually prompted a lot of businesses to change the IT models overnight. Out of many such concerns, one of the major changing factors has been the cloud security, which actually has compelled us to re-strategize the complete information security program overall. A very recent study, according to Hermetic, nearly 80% of the companies have experienced at least one cloud data breach in the past 18 months. So this is what we're trying to address and cover in this webinar. Our Sumeru's principal security consultant will basically investigate and discuss the actions to mitigate the risk, increase the security, and try to enhance the organization's cloud infrastructure resilience. So having been said that, let me introduce to our host today. He's Mr. Krishna Kumar, also known as KK. He's been with Sumeru as a senior principal consultant for about 12 plus years, and in the cybersecurity domain specifically, having a lot of expertise in various areas like cloud and container security, red teaming, and digital forensics. He also has been training a lot of professionals above who are 1000 plus in areas such as infrastructure and application security. And he's done a lot of certifications. To name a few, it includes GREM, GPEN, GMOP, and so on. And and he would be mainly addressing these issues, challenges, threats, solutions that actually concerns with the cloud security. And KK will go ahead and take the session forward. And meanwhile, during this entire session, if there are any questions, any queries that comes up, all you can throughout the session put in all these details in the Q&A box on the right side. So anytime during the session, you do not have to wait until the session gets over, but in between you can address all of those. So while the session completes, KK will actually pick all of those queries during the end and would address specifically. And KK, it's over to you now.
Okay, thanks a lot for the introduction, Snigdha.
No.
Good morning, everybody. Snigdha was saying, there's one reason why we picked cloud security, especially during these pandemic times. What we saw in the last 6 to 8 months was most of our requirements from our clients were either the initial phase of the pandemic, people wanted to go, they had a lot of their assets or applications, products, which are all exposed internally, and they had their employees, workers working and accessing applications from their home or at the different places wherever they were. And so companies were trying to move their products and applications on the cloud, or they had setups where their VPN was not safe enough. They were not able to handle the load through their VPN connections, and they had to go for a cloud broker access model to support different users. So we saw that there was an increase in the cloud security requirements from our clients. So that was one main reason we saw that the number of security issues which were coming up in the cloud was also in a constant rise. So we thought, okay, let's start off our webinar in Sumeru through covering some of the trends, especially during our COVID times, what Sumeru has seen from our clients, and what do we see in the future. So the workflow, the agenda for the day would be like, we'll start off with general cloud trends, and then see what are the different challenges we faced during the pandemic, what are the different threats and the most common and top threat as such in the cloud space, and then see what were we doing in Sumeru with our clients and helping and mitigating these different security threats. Meanwhile, I'll just to reiterate, Snigdha was saying, it'll be good if you guys can put your questions as you get them use the Q&A tab and publish them, so I can address them towards the end. So it is pretty known today that the largest cloud service provider today is AWS, and they had an early age of starting and providing a lot of these service instances. Though Google was providing it, but doing it internally. Amazon came up, and if you see like the market share captured by AWS is pretty dominant across the globe, and Azure is catching up a lot close by, where you see a lot of enterprises who already have their Active Directory and they want to move that as well to the cloud. It kind of helps them for a lot of enterprises to make the migration a lot more easier. And the pricing wise, Google has been trying to offer a lot of discounts and try to catch up with AWS and Microsoft Azure. But what interestingly we saw during this COVID time is due to a lot of data regulations with respect to privacy, data security, where the data is stored, a lot of these organizations are trying to have the data within their geo, like staying within India, for example, with the new data privacy regulation which is coming up. There is a mandate that all our banking data, personal data would have to reside within India. So a lot of these service providers are rushing to set up new data delivery centers, data centers, and zones and regions within at least every possible continent. If you see, for example, in Africa, there are not many of the cloud providers earlier present there. Now, a lot of people are trying to start their own centers there so that they can meet the data regulations. And another trend we noticed was all these different service providers who were into different product service offerings like virtualization and hardware, etc., database like Oracle, IBM, VMware. They started to have their services on the cloud as well. And so we see this trend of companies accessing different type of services and getting into a multi-cloud architecture where they're just not reliant on any one single provider today, which is the evolution of by a significant proportion in the last 1 year, I would say, where earlier people were pretty hesitant with respect to some of the data, what type of data can they move to the cloud, what proportion of the infrastructure should they have it on-prem. Then slowly people started to move their non-sensitive applications and have the single tenant architecture. And then we slowly saw the growth of multi-tenant architecture, where a lot of cloud service providers and their customers were introducing its own set of security risks. Like we had a recent experience where when we compromised, got access to one of the databases of a customer. We were able to get access to the other customer databases as well, which was a big issue in a multi-tenant architecture. And then today we see that trend of multi-cloud providers for a single organization, right? I mean, people are using Office 365 for email. They may already have some applications on AWS. They may have some third-party vendors or APIs which they are consuming from their GCP and so on. So Salesforce is another common application across a lot of enterprises. So the cloud space as such has moved from one service provider to multiple service providers for a single organization. So now, what is the need for organizations to go with more than one provider? What we've seen is the very first thing is, like you said, because of these data regulations where you have to have the data within your specific country. Most of these current service providers, they have only one region in a country. And when you have to have a backup in order for your business continuity or your disaster recovery plans, you kind of tend to have to have another service provider so that you meet your regulations and your necessary requirements. And also, we see there are some the race against futures for different cloud services. Like there are some set of services which are just available, and the others are playing catch up. So people try to consume those services with the other. Like a typical case being the Azure Active Directory. Like if you want to move your Active Directory from on-prem to your cloud, we've seen that people are having their Active Directory or the internal network infrastructure going to preferring Azure, and then they are having other third-party applications on AWS. And then we also see another primary factor being cost. Especially like there's been a lot of cases where even with our clients, we constantly keep hearing that the reasons for not turning on logs are because they don't have a visibility of how many logs to enable, and these things add up over time, and this results in a huge bill. I mean, there was a couple of years where we heard a client, one of our clients in the US, who had a bill of several $1,000s, which they had no clue until the bill was generated at the end of the month. So there were a lot of these cost factors which comes into play, and people try to choose which is more economical for them. Now, what type of data is pretty common in the cloud? What we've seen is, whatever data which is there on-prem, like though people were shy in the beginning to move the sensitive data or little hesitant, we've seen that today you pretty much have all the data, right from your personal records, employee data, right from customers' data, all the payment details, any financial transactions, healthcare records, or be it student records, or competitor data like intellectual properties. We've had a case where one of our clients had their product designs, which are supposed to be their copyright and proprietary information. They were stored in a S3 bucket, which was accessible publicly. So you see all these different type of data, which are today present in the cloud, and they can result in pretty serious damage for the organization. Mm. So during this pandemic, especially now, some of the challenges which we noticed before COVID are I think continuing and has increased predominantly during this phase. Like if you see in case of the earlier COVID situations, the most common challenges we face where people are not aware of the cloud security posture. The common assumption is whatever security you have on-prem, and when you move that to your cloud, you carry out the same security setup, but that's not the case. We've seen that again and again. Like people think that your network perimeter, when those protect your unnecessary ports or services, and when they move to the cloud, these things again open up, and they kind of introduce another vulnerability. Similarly, in cloud, a lot of people spin off new instances, new VMs, and it kind of becomes a little challenging to track all your different cloud assets. And another common scenario we've seen, especially with the burst of mobile applications, and a lot of companies are building several mobile apps and consuming a lot of backend APIs. And these APIs are mostly on the cloud without any authentication. These APIs, and they again introduce a bunch of vulnerabilities and security issues along with them, which again results to a lot of data leak. We'll be covering some case studies and what our experiences we've seen in these last 7-8 months with different clients of what type of data we saw, what were the challenges some of our customers faced. Another common scenario, I think this is especially with the cybersecurity industry, and I would say even more in the cloud security domain, because of the recent burst or explosion in the migration towards the cloud. What has happened is we see most of the cases companies having their IDT managing the cloud infra, and they are mostly learning on the go. So you generally prefer to have your functionality or application move to the cloud, and then you see until you have your business functionality or the actual application functionality working, and you deprioritize your security. So these kind of results mostly because of a lot of human errors, and obviously also a negligent, like some kind of an insider misbehavior, where they misuse some of the controls they have, or they are pretty careless with respect to putting some of the security controls in your application. Now, coming to one of the most popular security incidents last year in 2019 was the Capital One data breach. Here, this was a pretty interesting use case, mainly because like some of the security controls, I mean, being a bank, it is an obvious expectation that you have like top-notch security, right? I mean, a lot of people expect a lot of security controls and audits to be carried out, but I think it goes back to the same assumption that people think that your on-prem security carries forward to your cloud security. I mean, the common understanding as well, misunderstanding, I would say, is that whatever security or regulations or compliance requirements the cloud service providers meet, they assume that it automatically takes care of your SaaS platform or your PaaS platforms. But that is not the scenario. What happens is, out of the box, whatever are provided, they need to be configured in the right way, which is where you see a lot of these common security issues. Like in case of a Capital One scenario, they had a web application which was vulnerable to SSRF, which is server-side request forgery, which is a type of application attack where the hacker can get access to the application and from get access to the internal or the backend data which is stored, which is not directly accessible from for a hacker or any person outside. So he gets into the application. From the application, he gets access to any the instance where the sensitive data was stored. So here, and they also had their firewall, which was weak, poorly configured. That again didn't pick this specific attack, and again it made it even more easier, and it took a lot of time for them to identify that they had a breach until this person was the specific person was talking about it in the chat, and it got leaked in the public forum, and that's when they realized that there was a lot of sensitive information like about more than 80,000 bank account numbers, several thousand social security numbers, and more than 1 million credit card, Canadian social insurance numbers available. So we'll see how during some of the mitigation, like how some of the controls now we implement could have prevented such an attack. Another famous case study was Imperva. This was even more bad for the reputation of Imperva, mainly because Imperva is a security company and they provide security products. And it was a small security labs, I would say. I mean, nobody is nobody can avoid any such security incidents in a lot of cases, but some people have some overlap or oversee some of the small configuration issues, and that leads kind of to a big impact for them. So in case of Imperva, what happened is they had their cloud web application firewall, which was being migrated to their Amazon's database and to manage their users. And what happened was one of the instances which they accidentally had it exposed publicly, and somebody got access to the admin API key. So through that, they were able to access their database snapshot, which had a lot of their customers' email IDs, their customers' passwords, but luckily the passwords certificates and other API keys, through which they were able to they could have done a lot more damage, which was kind of monitored, and I think they took it under control. So what we see here again is a common a simple misconfiguration on a cloud side, and which resulted in a very big bad reputation damage for companies like Imperva and Capital One. Now, what's changed now? So okay, so these are from last year. So what's happened in COVID? So for more detailed, bigger studies of the different type of data breaches and whatever security incidents during this time, we'll see for the reports in the early next year. But from Sumeru's perspective, what we saw in the last 8 months, the number of security audits and penetration testing which we did for our cloud applications, we saw that our existing clients who were earlier, who were earlier on-prem, they had to quickly migrate to the cloud, or clients who were early. Sorry, can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. So what we saw was a lot of our clients had their migrations happening pretty rapidly, and definitely they didn't think of security, and they had their priority was to get their business first up and running, and try to cater to their customers. We had, or there was other case type of customers who had very small presence, or like their cloud infra as such was pretty in small scale, where they didn't have a lot of earlier customers. So they had to scale quickly to meet a lot of demand of the customers. So this resulted in people spinning up a lot of VMs and instances, and this kind of increased the attack surface exponentially. We saw like some of our customers who had just 3-4 servers who go to suddenly 15-20, and they had like a huge bill. This resulted in obviously a lot of entry points for the attacker, which made it a lot more easier for him, and also it became even more challenging for the IT team or the team who was managing these cloud infrastructure to have a tap of what were the different services running, where were they used, who all has access to it. It was pretty crazy. I mean, so it was pretty challenging for a lot of our customers. And the other common trend we saw was, because of this COVID, a lot of companies had, you know, they had their budgets cut. And like in most of the cases when these budgets are reduced, it kind of impacts the IT team, especially with their restrictions or the limitations in what they could do. This in turn kind of impacted with a downsizing of a team as well. We already know in the cybersecurity industry there is a lack of skilled expertise, especially in the cloud domain. And this kind of made an overload. Like we had teams where they outsourced, they had to cut down their security team, they outsourced, and they came to us and we were serving some of them. And we saw that their current IT team were not capable enough to understand how to set up. So we were not just trying to find the security, do a security audit of their cloud infra, but also we had to help them work with them very closely and work on the solutions and securing their cloud infrastructure, which was pretty challenging for the customer. And we saw this as a repeated pattern over the last 7-8 months. So, I mean, this is obvious. Like the reason we obviously why a lot of companies had to meet was one of your current workforce, which was all behind a perimeter firewall within your office or corporate environment. They all started to move out. They work from different locations. They take care of. They connect from their homes. They probably connect from some insecure networks, or they get the data from the mobile. I mean, you see these trend which has increased in the last several months, and also what has happened is people have started also using their own devices, which were earlier not part of your corporate network. So people were connecting their personal laptops, using their personal mobiles to access emails. Attack surface increased even more, which made it even more easier for hackers to get inside your network. Another common trend, a common usage we see which pushed the cloud growth was remote connectivity and video conferencing. Like I mean, even now if you see, like I'm assuming most of us are connecting from your home and attending this webinar as well, right? I mean, now I think video conferencing is part of our day-to-day work, and when you're working collaboratively, you have these needs which are enforced, and you don't have a choice. So these options of connecting remotely in a secure way, now how do we share data in a secure way? How do we access it from wherever we are located, and then how do we put a full security package around it? Was very interesting. Now, what we have seen is, or what we as as a hackers, generally like a lot of security folks, we find it even more challenging. But for hackers, it's made it very easy. Like for everybody, I think their attack surface has made it a lot more easier for them to get access to these sensitive data, and make it a lot more easier for them to hack into their different assets, which were earlier just internal and confined, have now been exposed publicly, made it a lot more easier for them to get access to the sensitive data. So I don't know, like post COVID, what is going to happen? Even during the current scenarios, like if you read the news, the number of ransomware attacks and the number of attacks on the healthcare industry, especially, has been like phenomenal, and the hackers are having a great time in accessing a lot of sensitive information. So what I mean, there are several security issues which we see on the cloud misconfiguration, and we'll try to do a little deep dive on the most common cloud misconfigurations which we noticed. Like I'll take a classic example of a client of a security audit we just did last week. So we had a red teaming engagement with one of the fintech companies in India, and it was very interesting where we just in a red teaming engagement we just need one entry point to get in and then like penetrate into the network, and we saw that they had a S3 bucket which was misconfigured, which got us access to a lot of sensitive data. Like we found a lot of PA data, like Aadhaar card information, driving license information, and then we also found some Excel sheets which had a lot of username passwords. So this kind of gave us an entry point into the organization's. Like we had access to some of the email accounts, and then we saw people using the same password across accounts. So I mean, it was a very simple security issue where the storage was misconfigured, but that kind of acted as an entry point, which opened us up into a bigger the entire network of their organization, and we were easily able to get them move inside the network and compromise a lot of sensitive data. So we had to carry out threat hunting and investigate if there was already somebody else who accessed it, map out their threat surface and find out if there were any other attack entry points for the organization, so on and so forth. I'll probably talk a little later, address those points. So one of the most common cloud misconfiguration we see is the identity and access management related issues. So what happens is, I mean, IAM as such is a very, very complex area, and we still see a lot of our customers finding it and not having a very proper understanding of it, and they just use it mostly as is out of the box. They try to create a group and assign all privileges for users and just add a user within a group. And what happens because of this is these users, the user groups are not having any restrictions, and these user roles are not again like you see a pretty common case where almost all users in that group will have entire privileges to like entire admin privileges where it is unnecessary for them for the type of role or function they have to do it. And then another shocking but a simple effective solution is multi-factor authentication. Like, we see how case and again like in several of the incidents, just having it helps you protect a lot of these security incidents. And at least for the cloud infrastructure, I think having multi-factor authentication enabled for your admin most critical accounts, especially your administrator root accounts, is very, very important. And we see almost, I've seen like, in the last several audits we did for our clients, I think except for one or two cases, most of them didn't have MFA enabled in most of the scenarios. So I think an important factor to consider is, especially when it comes to user roles and permissions, following the principle of least privilege, where you assign necessary roles as and when needed, and then ensure that you revoke it if it is no longer in use. Like we've seen a scenario where in one of the organizations, we found a user who had admin privileges, but that person was no more associated with the organization. Or we've seen cases where there are a person who moved away from different departments and they still had a lot of privileged access within their cloud infrastructure, and these kind of become entry points for your for the hacker to get access to sensitive data. Another challenge we've seen is with respect to encryption, and especially it is specific to the data at rest encryption. Like if you see in the case of the Capital One data breach, or even in the case of the infra data breach, like when these guys had access to the S3 buckets, or the database snapshot, these were not encrypted. Like they were easily accessible, so that's how that the hacker got access to the sensitive data. So here, when you look at the encryption solutions, so one part is the default assumption is when you look at encryption, people think that having HTTPS or taking care of data at transit security is sufficient. But what happens is a lot of cases even we have to follow the defense in depth solution where we have security at every layer, like having security at the database level, at the full disk encryption or the instance or the server level, and then also the table level that comes into picture. And also again, I think once you have these encryption, you have these security keys which you have to manage more securely. Where again KMS or the key management service plays a very critical role. How do you manage these keys? How often do you rotate them, etc. So I think this whole part is, I mean, we didn't see many of the clients have it, and we had to work closely with a lot of customers in implementing these security solutions. I hope I'm not going pretty fast. In case I mean, you guys have any questions, please keep putting them out, and so that I can take them and address them at the end of the session. Another common security misconfiguration in the cloud we've noticed is with respect to web application firewalls. So we know that in a lot of scenarios, I mean, when the applications are hosted on the cloud, I mean, they don't enable the web application firewall, or even if it's enabled, what happens is they go with the out of box rule set, and they don't do anything additional. So, like in case of the infra data breach, again, I think, in case of the Cap2 data breach, no, they were using mod security, and they didn't have any proper rule set customized, or they didn't have it set properly. So which was which allowed SSR attack to happen, and the guy was able to extract data. So what needs to be done in a lot of application cases is not just enable your WAF, but also ensure that you fine-tuned it and customize it based for your scenario. I think that's very critical in case of WAF, a lot of the WAF solutions, right? I mean, most of these cloud providers, they have their own WAF solutions, or you can always use third-party solutions as well. But it's important that you understand and customize it based on your business application requirements. And another common vulnerability we saw in a lot of our clients was they were using a lot of APIs, and these APIs are easily abused by hackers. Like you don't have. We've seen our customers not having proper authentication for these APIs, and the APIs could be brute force, where they are able to extract data of several other customers or several other users. Or we've seen cases where the hackers were able to do much more than what the API was actually configured for, because the API was not set up in the right way. So the abuse of API has been phenomenal, and we found actually, I think, almost in all the cases where there was some type of vulnerability in these APIs, which kind of made like an entry point, and then people were able to extract sensitive details, and we were able to get access to the network. Another common misconfiguration which we noticed was with respect to the audit logs. This is very interesting, because I mean, we've seen even in fact in our on-prem network security assessments, or even when we are doing a red team testing, most of the cases the blue team or the SOC team don't have the capability to identify many of the attack vectors which are used, and they miss the alerts, or either they are overwhelmed by a lot of these alerts which are generated by a lot of other requests and responses, right? So what happens in the case of the cloud, it increases even more. We've seen that a lot of cases, first of all, the audit logs are not enabled, and even if they're enabled, they are not set again monitored in the right properly. So this makes it even more difficult, because either you enable audit logs and ensure that you have it enabled for all the critical accounts at the bare minimum, so that you ensure that if anything new is created, or anything any instance is deleted, or any storage access, somebody is accessing it and trying to exfiltrate a huge amount of data, or etc. So all these scenarios, what happens is, if you don't have a proper logging in place, and then after that, once you have the logging set up, you have to also monitor it. So here again, I think the SOC service comes into picture and it becomes very important. And not only that, we've seen cases where when there is an incident in any of the cloud service providers you use, and if you don't have your logs enabled, it becomes very, very challenging as a digital forensic investigator to investigate what actually happened, right? To identify what data was accessed, from where did the hacker access it, how much did we exfiltrate. All these things become very, very challenging, especially in cloud. So, I mean, I think this enabling of logs and continuous monitoring of it becomes very, very crucial. Now, how is Sumeru helping in all this? Like I was saying, so many of the cases where we've been doing these security audits of this cloud infrastructure, one of the main things where we also had requirements and we've been helping our clients is doing a thorough detailed penetration testing, and not just running a tool-based automated scan, but doing proper pen testing of your entire cloud infrastructure. And one of the main components of your cloud infra is your EC2 instance or your VMs, right? So this, I think, very much resembles to how you approach in your infrastructure network people, where you look at the different services, what are the different open ports, and if you have any unnecessary open or exposed, what if you're running any outdated versions, etc. So we carry out a detailed pen test of your EC2 instances. And then what we do is, like I was mentioning earlier about the APIs, we try to see what are the different ways the hackers will abuse your API. Do you have your proper rate limiting functionality enabled? Do you have proper authentication? Have you restricted the access? Then you have you configured it in a way where it can't be misused or the hacker to extract any sensitive data, etc. I mean, there are like this is more application focused, but specific to the cloud infrastructure, and focusing on different threats, and one of these associated with the cloud VPNs. And another testing which we carry out are specifically focused on the storage buckets like S3 buckets or Azure blocks, where we've seen again here with respect to the permissions, like are these storage having the right permissions? Are they supposed to be exposed publicly? And if their internal who all has access to it, etc. Then coming to the next important point of identity and access management. If you see in one of our clients' review, in one of the recent engagement we had when we did a detailed policy review, it helped them to strengthen their they had of user groups which were not following any of the security controls. So what we had to do was we had to understand what were the different user roles, what were the applications which actually needed permission, and so we were able to reduce from about some 150 odd user groups and roles and permissions to a significantly lot less, about 30 to 40, and we were able to put the additional security controls, and we found like I don't know, I think we found more about almost about 10, 20 users who have moved out of the organization, and they still had some level of access to some of the storage buckets or some of the EC2 instances. So I think doing a regular policy review of your IAM is very, very important because it's an ongoing activity where you see people starting up new instances or having new storage. I mean, it's a common practice, right? So it's important that you disable the unnecessary, revoke if a user has left or moved to a different department. You ensure that you keep tab of it on a regular basis. Like as said earlier, in case of for the audit log review, what we do is a thorough audit of whether these audit logs are enabled, and then how are they consumed, how long are they stored, where are they stored, and how do you ensure that you don't enable all logs, because then you're going to be bombarded with a huge list of them, and you're going to miss out your most important incidents or alerts which you actually need, right? So it's important you also keep on a regular basis, keep logging and ensure that your critical accounts or your service accounts which needs to be monitored will be there enabled, and also have a proper remote storage of these logs, so that even if somebody gets access to your data, your console, and or gets access to your storage, he's not able to delete your logs. So I think these are things which we look into in the audit log process. Here, like I was saying earlier, in case of a review of the data address encryption, we look at all the different layers of encryption, right from your full disk encryption to your table encryption, database encryption, and also how the keys are stored, where are they managed, how frequently are the keys rotated, what is the life cycle. I mean, this is a very detailed process where we work with our customers and help in ensuring that they follow the best practices with respect to the data at rest encryption. Apart from all these other things with respect to cloud security, I mean, like Sumeru as such, we provide a lot of other bunch of services, like right from application security testing to network and infrastructure security testing, a lot of compliance and data privacy related offerings as well, right from ISO, HIPAA, etc. And then we also do a lot of security trainings on infrastructure, on application security, on security awareness for our clients. And we also offer SOC as a service for customers, where we do continuous monitoring, we help in digital forensic investigations, etc. And Sumeru has its own proprietary tool called Threat Meter, which kind of built out of our red team engagements, where we saw during a red team, we used to get access to a lot of sensitive data, but most of these were passive open source intelligence work, right? So we try to collect, map out the digital attack surface of the organization and figure out what are the different entry points for a company, which could be the initial foothold to get in and then compromise the organization. So over time, what we did was we took several of these scripts, we put it together and try to help in assessing an organization's attack surface, see the assess the brand reputation, and use it for third-party vendor risk assessment, who's getting onboarded in the company. So that's another new interesting service which we are providing, and we've seen a lot of customers very interested in this. Along with it, we combine our continuous vetting and try to complement the tool and the manual, automated as well as the manual part, and try to assess a company's risk exposure and map the digital attack surface for organization. Here, I mean, this is just a subset of a group of all service offerings categorized with the cybersecurity framework under different categories, where to identify the different security threats, what are the different things we do for protection, detection, and then with respect to respond and recover, as well as with compliance. So we've been, Sumeru has been offering cybersecurity for more than 15 years, and these are some of our clients, happy clients, I would say, that we've been carrying out a lot of these security audits, not just in cloud with respect, but also application, infrastructure, network security, configuration review, etc. Yeah, I think that's it from my side. I would like, I'll probably go to the question sections and try to address them. By the way, if you guys have, you can still post some of the questions, whatever you need, and we take it. Okay, so there is a question about will disk encryption protect our data in case of a hack? So look, when it comes to security, I think there is no one single foolproof solution for solving your security problems, right? I mean, we've seen that. I think the defense in depth approach comes into picture, and it's very critical. Yeah. So what happens? So having disk encryption, again, like I said, we have like different layers of disk encryption. Like one is your full disk encryption. That is when somebody physically steals your hard disk, right? And then you have your database encryption, which again, when you're using, it's just when you're loading the application, loading the database, then the data is again available in an unencrypted format. So it is important that we have server-side encryption as well. And then you have to also restrict the users who have access to the database. You regularly monitor their accounts for any activities during odd times, or any actions like probably delete or anything they are trying to update. I mean, you keep on a regular check. So it is not a single foolproof solution, but I think there is a mix of several things which you follow, as like I said, follow a defensive depth approach to ensure that you keep a regular track and ensure that you kind of minimize your impact. There is nothing as 100% secure or fully secure uh, organization or application in the world. Everything has its own vulnerabilities. It's that we have to ensure that we take the necessary precautions at each layer possible and make it as typical as possible to be happen. So the question is on what about data address encryption? Does the encryption affect performance? Yeah, okay, yeah, this is a common case actually we've seen with our clients, where a lot of our customers, they don't enable or don't have this encryption enabled because of performance, fear of performance issues. So what happens is, in case of like a full disk encryption, I mean, especially in the cloud scenario, I don't think you're going to see any performance impact. But even in case of a full disk encryption, the encryption it is decrypted when the instance is loaded. Similarly, in the case of a database, at the initial level, when the application is loaded and the database is loaded, it is already decrypted. So every time your application, I mean, when it's trying to access any data in the database, there is no impact at all. But when it comes to the data which is stored in the like any PA data, any sensitive data which you need to encrypt in your database, those has to be. I mean, while accessing them, you may see. You may not see. I mean, most of the performance-related issues are very insignificant, especially cloud infra as such. It's pretty. I mean, you have these specs to be very high end, so you won't see any of these impacts. But again, it is important that you don't encrypt all your data in the table. It is important that you do it only for your sensitive data. Please understand that you don't encrypt your passwords. Your passwords are supposed to be salted and hashed, whereas these sensitive PI data needs to be encrypted, and you don't have to encrypt anything else. Yeah. So, what type of logs needs to be stored? So here, like I said, if you take, for example, the database logs, right, any audit log. So what any sensitive actions, like especially if anybody is trying to do any ads or perform a delete action, or sensitive accounts like service accounts, the accounts which are administrative accounts where they have higher access or higher privilege. These are very important to be logged and monitored, because you see most of the cases, even we as a pen tester or a security tester, when we try to get access into a server or any database, if the proper security is in place, we get a low level access. We are mostly restricted by what kind of control or what kind of action we can take, right? So we try to elevate our privilege, try to get admin access. So most of the scenarios, like as a normal user or low level user, what we can perform will be very limited. It will mostly be just read access. So any activities which relate to write access, like or delete, etc. Like these accounts, privileged accounts, they need to be monitored very closely. Like that, similarly, like any storages where there are sensitive data, these also needs to be logged regularly and monitored closely. And if there is any abuse of, like I said, in the case of the APIs, abuse of like a lot of requests coming in, a lot of somebody trying to misuse the normal functionality of an application, try to see any suspicious and anomaly activity there. So those kind of activities are supposed to be logged and monitored. Yeah, I think matter of time. I think okay, we're running short of time. So thank you, everybody. As part of this webinar, I mean, we would like you guys to fill up the feedback form, which I'll be showing in the next slide. So, once you fill in the feedback form from Sumeru's side, we'll get a free external, like I was talking about threat meter product, you will get access to a free domain analysis and try to, we'll give you a report on your external threat surface. And also, we'll provide you three security advisory reports, which is very relevant to today's security threats in the industry. And then we'll obviously we'll also share the session recording with you guys. And meanwhile, you can use the URL shown on the screen, and also a moderator has shared the link in the chat, which you can use to fill up the form and get access to these reports as well. Thank you so much for joining the webinar. I hope you enjoyed it, and in case you have any questions, please okay, sorry, I see one more question. Probably I'll take the last question. What are the minimum incident response plan we need to have if our cloud is compromised? Yeah, so with respect to the incident response plan, one main, I mean, so most of the cases, I think what we've seen is one, I think, ensuring that in this, you have already a SOC setup. Like have your team also monitoring your critical assets in your cloud. Like having, like I said about the type of logs, like ensure that you have an understanding of what are the sensitive data which is on the cloud. Like whatever you move from your on-prem to the cloud environment, ensure that at the bare minimum you have a clear control and visibility into what are sensitive data is there, who all has access to it, and then you try to also restrict the access and have all these activities and logs configured and kind of consumed by a SOC, so that you can see these alerts whenever there are any suspicious activity or any normal activity, also to keep a tab on it. Your incident response plan should be in a way where you already have the support of your blue team, trying to have an understanding of the similar log setup of your infrastructure, I would say. So what we've seen in cases is the organizations, the SOC team has a very strong hold of their infrastructure in a setup, and the SOC consumes all these logs. But whereas the cloud logs, most of the cases don't feed into their main log policy, so their main SOC, and they resort on these logs. And sorry. And, and also, like, I think one other thing with respect to incident response plan is also important, that you carry out some type of red team activity or threat hunting to assess that whatever how secure you are talking to, and whether you are able to identify all the malicious actions which are performed by a pen tester, right? And whenever somebody is trying to attack or trying to exfiltrate data, are these different entry points or triggered, and are they creating an alert? Like, I think these are the things which you should consider when you are designing your incident response plan. Like, a lot of companies have a good plan in paper, but they don't test the effectiveness of it, and that kind of becomes useless when in case of a breach, right? I mean, you kind of then look back into the incident response plan, and a lot of the scenarios we see that people are opening and seeing it for the first time, and you're pretty much too late into that scenario. So I think testing your incident response plan becomes a lot more important. Sorry, I think okay, I'm running short of time. I think we'll get to 12 o'clock time limit, and I kindly request you guys to please use the feedback form and provide your feedback. Thank you so much, and looking forward to you guys for more upcoming webinars. Thanks a lot.